John Summit has recently dropped a new tech house banger called Legacy, which sounds like this.
No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush.
And in this video, I'm going to teach you how to make tech house in a style of John Summit, which sounds like this.
No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No regret. No hurry, no rush. No.
For those of you who are new to the channel, my name is Vlad and I create superstar music producers. If you're interested in my one-on-one coaching and you want to work on your music production skills, all the links are down below. Feel free to book a call with me or send me a message on Instagram. And without further talking, let's get straight into the video. So the very first thing that I want to talk about is going to be the kick, the bass. And this track has a really interesting sound design in it. So if I solo my kick and the bass pattern, you will hear it has multiple very interesting layers that we are going to break down just in a second. So let me solo that for you, and it's going to sound like this. So the first thing that I want to start with is going to be the kick. So I try to replicate the kick. If you take a look at the waveform of the reference track, the original one, you can see the kick is pretty long. And here he has something. I don't know like what this is, but I did something. I did layer some orchestral drums to sort of get a similar vibe. If we look at this one, so you can see it's sort of similar. But let's start with the kick. I'm gonna solo the kick and tell you about the layering techniques and everything that I used in the for my low end basically. So this is the original kick, which sounds like this. It's going to be just one layer, and listen to how it sounds. So it's pretty massive, like pretty classic tech house kick. I used a bit of filtering here to reduce the highs, and then I layered it with basically like a click, the second layer of the kick. It's like a mid kick, like with the click, something like this. And all together it sounds like this. Really nice punch, really nice kick, and I removed a little bit of mids with an EQ because I just like kicks like that. I don't like kicks with too much middle frequency, so that's for the kick. Now let's talk about the bass layer. So the first bass layer, what I heard in the original track was the 808 bass line. It's a very basic patch in Serum, so all I have here is going to be the sine wave. You will get the preset, you can download the project, so I'm not gonna like explain in too much details, but basically what we have here is that the LFO is basically modulating the master tuning, right? So if I bypass, it's basically like a sine wave with a bunch of distortion at this point. But once I enable that, we can activate that. It's gonna sound like this. And you just need to find the right envelope for your LFO, right? So that's basically how it looked in the original one. The key of the track is gonna be E. That's for the first bass line. And as I said, the track has really interesting sound design when it comes to the low end. It's not really like that tonal. It's more like a rumble, this like sort of rumble, techno, tech house kind of vibe, but the second bass is basically like just a square, right? I just have like a square with a little bit of distortion and a tiny bit of OTT. If I disable that, it's pretty much like in the original one.
No hurry, no rush.
Right? It's a little bit darker at this point, but if you listen in the beginning, for example,
no rush, no hurry. No rush.
It's like whoa, those little fills. So you can experiment a bit with that depending on like what kind of sound you want to achieve. But I decided to go with a little bit like brighter sound at this point. So here we can take a look at the sound design. Excuse me. So as I said, it's just like a simple square waveform, really short release time, and then I'm using the second envelope to control the filter here, right? So you can see the filter is pretty, I would say pretty soft. And then you can play a little bit with the envelope, let's say if you want to make it something like this. So just depending on your taste and what kind of sound you want to achieve. And then we have a bit of distortion. And then we can put one more filter just. And I would actually put back the release time here. Something like this. But then again, you can play with the sounds as much as you want. So the next thing is going to be the percussion bassline, and this is where the magic happens. And I want to show you how I did it. Again, this is not like 100% copy. It's how I see that, like in the same style, because I generally just don't feel inspired when I'm trying to like copy it. I like taking like 70-80% of the original track and then just make the drums, make the bass line how I want. But the principles that you will learn from this, it's gonna be pretty much like the same, right? So if we listen to the percussion bass line, check it out. Really nice, right? It's a percussive, not really tonal bass line, which sounds like this. So I have multiple layers. So the layer number one is going to be just some orchestral drum hits, which sounds like this. And once it hits together with a kick, it creates that nice layered bass line basically, right? So if we listen in a club, let's say it's in a club environment, it's really nice. It's just giving like that something extra to the bass line. In terms of the processing, I decided to filter that a little bit. I have put some sidechain on pretty much like on every single hit sound, but you can also do that on the whole group, but it's going to really depend on the envelope that you want to use. If you want to use like unique envelope for each of the sounds, depending like on the length of the sound, on the character of the sound and so on, because maybe some of the sounds will require a bit less sidechain, the next sound will maybe require more sidechain. So again, just see if you want to put it on an individual one or if it's going to be like on the whole group. But basically that's going to be one layer, right? And then we have the next one. It's like this. So it's basically cashmere drum, like orchestral drums. You can take any drums, you can take basically any percussion, just something that goes well with the track. Again, like it might not be like 100% accurate to the original track, but it's like the techniques, the concepts is the same. Like once you apply the same techniques, you get pretty much like exactly the same groove, because I tried to replicate it as much as I could. And then again, in terms of the processing, a bit of EQ here, a bit of distortion just to make it a little bit fatter. That's it, right? Now let's talk about the second layer. So I'm going to mute these and then let's talk about the final one. So here I have three sounds. Sound number one is going to be this percussive sound. The second one is going to be some sort of percussion again, and then all together it can sound like this. I would maybe put it down a bit. So in a club, so once we listen to that all together with the kick, but now without the bass line, right? You can see it creates that extra groove. So we are doing that just at the end of the loop here. And when it comes to layering those sounds, you can do this with MIDI. I would suggest you do this with MIDI. So basically you take every single sample and then you create one channel and then you just put it as MIDI for one simple reason. You can control the length like this, and you can also shape the envelope like this. And moreover, you can also apply, let's say if I do like this, I can also apply some grooves. But just for the sake of this video, I just feel like I want to go with audio. So you would have to manually, if you're doing audio, you would have to manually micro shift them to create some extra groove, right? So yeah, it's going to be up to you. I prefer working with MIDI at this point, right? So that's pretty much it for the percussive bass line. I don't want to go like into too much of the details. we will talk about the processing at the end once I explain like everything about the low end here. But basically, let's listen to everything once again, all together. There's one more sound, which is basically just like a tom. Pretty classic, right? It gives that extra bounce. Really nice. And then we can listen all together, and then I'm gonna tell you about the sound design here. So let's listen to the low end. I think this one could be a bit quieter because it's a little bit too, maybe -6. Let's listen to the clip. Actually, something like this. I think something like this would work well. Yeah. Okay, so that's going to be it for the sound design itself. Now let's talk about the processing part, because this one is really, really interesting. This is how I'm able to achieve such a nice sound. So first thing that I have is going to be the saturation, but first let me bypass everything. And I'm going to bypass everything on the groups, and you're going to hear it's going to be like a very, very big difference. Maybe not as much, actually. It's just like more tight, more fat. So let's first talk about the group processing. So thing number one is going to be saturation. So saturation is one of my favorite ways to glue sounds together, especially when it comes to kick and the bass. So if you take a look, that's without. Maybe not such a big difference, but it glues a little bit. Especially if you listen to this one. And we can play with that, right? If you want to have more mids, if you want to have like more distorted sound. But I prefer having my low end like nice and clean, so be careful with the saturation. The next step is going to be a little bit of EQ here. So I boosted 60 Hertz because this is like an area where we have the most like nice sub. Check with it. This is with, and this is without. So pretty much just this part of the track. And then we can boost a little bit of maybe like 200 as well, to have that like nice and fat load. Something like that, right? So just a little bit, maybe 0.7, something like that, right? So that's going to be for the group processing. And an interesting part about the percussion is going to be this. So I had some pretty creative sound design here. I was trying to come up with a way to make it sound flatter, and this is what I came up with. So there's a plugin called Isotope Trash, which is really, really nice. It's like a creative distortion plugin. So if I solo, I simply just used like a preset here. It's really fat, right? I'm not gonna break down like every single setting here. I just use the preset. You can get the plugin, you can check it out. Maybe if you have it already, then cool. But that's one layer. That's the second one. And like they are really similar. It's really, really fat, right? And then we have the original one, the original layer, which is dry. It doesn't have any like specific effects or like whatsoever. That's the original one. And once I layer that like in multiple layers, it becomes really, really fat. This is without. Right? We can play with the kick. And now with this one, really nice and fat. But be careful, because if you apply too much, it's just not going to sound really that good. Then a little bit of EQ, because I wanted to keep my percussive bass line really nice, really clean, without too many mid frequencies. So just like that, I reduced the top end here, so it's like nice and deep. And then a bit of compression. I think we can do actually quite aggressive. I would do, compensate, and I would apply maybe like 30% or something like that, because it's like low frequencies, you can compress a bit more. So it's really tight, right? Without this one, it's, and now it's much tighter, like much more controlled. So that's it for the low end. Now let's talk about the drums. So the drums is like a really interesting part of this track, right? Let me just first like play you the track once again, so you can understand how everything is sounding at this point. Just to remind.
No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No regret. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no.
I just instantly, when I vibe to the track, I would have played in the club, you know. It's so good. It's really close, like stylistically, to the original one. Like it's not 100% the same, but yeah. Let's talk about the drums. So the drums, I didn't copy like 100%, but he had like pretty massive claps. So in terms of the claps, I just layered 3 samples. I'm not gonna like go too much deep into the details, but this is clap number 1. It's like a snare, right? Then the second one, another one. Let me solo. It's more like for the width, and then the last one. So it has that nice tail, and all together it sounds like this. Really nice and punchy. Okay, that's pretty much it. Now let's talk about the hats. So for the hats, again, like it's going to be pretty much pretty simple actually, right? So let me mute those. So at this point we have 2 hats. One, I felt like it would really work with this like jacking. It's pumping. The hat is pumping, right? You can see the envelope. It's pretty short. I would do something like this. The second one is, it's more like for the texture. You see, it just adds a little bit of texture. And then what we have here is basically gonna be like just syncopated. Let me solo, unsolo, and let's play all together with the bass line. Just listen to how it sounds. So I have, they are very similar, just like a little bit different. There's one more sound here. And then all I'm doing here, I'm just trying to replicate the pattern or like achieve similar vibe per se. And then at the end, I'm not using anything just so it could like resolve and loop in a nice way. Let's listen for the claps. And just because I have this tom sound, which is this one, if you listen to it, it's like boom, like this. It gives you that bounce. It's really important to have this like bouncy feeling in your track, because if you don't have it, it's just not gonna sound good in the club. That's gonna be the point. Okay, so then in the original track, he also had this percussive sound. I couldn't find the sample which would sound like identical, but I used 2 percussion samples. It's like 80-85% similar in terms of the pattern. So it creates that extra groove, extra bounce. As you can see, it's really, really simple. The drums should not be too complicated. If you have too many drum samples playing at the same time, it's just not going to sound nice. It will be a mess. I tested that on my own tracks when I play in the club. It just doesn't, it's not going to work good. So trust me, keep the drums simple. Keep it simple, guys, because that's really the secret to good sounding tracks. Then we have a tambourine. It's pretty much just like a loop. so I didn't even process it that much. Just an EQ here. Okay, like this. Now, let's talk about the percussive fills. So this is basically where I had a lot of fun yesterday just playing with this track. You know, I was like, hey, let me make a tutorial. But then I was like, you know what? I don't want to copy. I just want to make in the same style, but add my own touch to it. So I added a bit of like tribal, ethnic percussions like that. And let me show you. So the first sample, these are all the loops, by the way. Like I didn't make them myself. So the first one is... So once you play it, it adds that extra bounce. It adds that accent, right? Really nice. Then the second one is going to be an interesting one. Check it out. This sound adds a bit of power. It makes the drum loop sound massive, like grand, right? Now we have another one. Let me do like this actually instead. I think that would be a bit easier to understand. So that's pretty much it. I just added a couple percussion loops so I could fill in those little gaps and add that extra groove to the track. Like without those percussion loops, it still sounds pretty cool though, but it's missing a little bit of that, like that extra bounce, that extra groove that we need for like pro sounding to house track, right? But be careful, because if you add too many percussion sounds, too many loops, it's just not going to sound really that nice, right? Now let's add those percussion fills. I just love this. Listen to it. So really nice. Okay, now let's talk about the processing, because if I disable the processing, the drum's not gonna sound as good. So processing is a really essential and important part of the sound design of like any tech house, like any electronic dance track, right? So these are the drums without the processing, and I'm gonna explain step by step what I did. It's like, what is that, right? It's just, it's really weak, right? Now, let's go step by step, and I'm gonna walk you through everything I did. So the first part is going to be the EQ. As you can see, I reduced the top end on the drums. One simple reason, because the next step in my chain, like the next plugin in my chain, it adds a lot of distortion to the sound. And you can see here, I used a bit of filtering, and I applied just about like 10%, something like that, right? So I'm gonna show you. So I just need a little bit. And you can hear already, that's the club simulation. It adds more fatness, more sustain, because we are using saturation to squash the dynamics of the sound. Right, that's the step number one. Then after that, I used a bit of transient shaping to, again, control the dynamics. I reduced the, So I reduced the sustain by like 3%. I increased the attack by 3% as well. And I did here, parallel processing is 50-50. Check it out. Gonna solo. And I'm gonna exaggerate that a bit. But I don't need that much. I realistically need maybe like 4.2. I think 3.5. And then we can apply, maybe I just want to apply like 20%, right? It's just gonna depend. But I like 50% at this point. Just see what goes well with the track that you have. maybe I want to leave a bit of sustain here, maybe just like 45. So again, you can adjust that, right? Okay, transient shaper, simple. Now, second saturator. So what this thing does, again, I'm just trying to work with specific areas of my drums. So I saturated the mids. Let me unsolo. Like, it's still good, right? It just brings up those mids. We are saturating the harmonics, and because of that, the mids of my drums sound really, really well. And then I saturate a little bit on the highs as well, but not too much because I already had like some saturation before in my processing chain. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, you can get the project, you can go through everything yourself and see how I did that. And then the mix, you can see it's just 50%. Because that's a little bit too much. So I'm using a bit of parallel processing here. So I would normally do anywhere between like, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 50, sometimes it's 75, sometimes it might be 100, right? So just see what works well for your track, and then yeah, you just apply that onto the whole group. The next step is a bit of multi-band compression, just to control the low part of the drums. Again, my goal with this is to shape the dynamics and make it sit better in the mix. And it works a little bit as like, what was the name of this? Dynamic EQ. It works as a dynamic EQ at some point. So this is why I'm not boosting that back. Maybe I want to boost it just like 0.6, right? And then the final step is going to be compression. So I didn't set it to auto, although you can. Fast attack, that's sidechain from the kick. I didn't use like the I didn't use compression on the whole group yet, but I would normally do that. But yeah, you can see we have a bit of sidechain compression from the kick. The attack and release are really fast because I want to have this pumping and like punchy sound. And you can see ratio 4:1 and dry wet about 75%. And we can also use the filter. So let's say it's going to be like 1,200. Something like that. Let's check without the compression. It gives that extra bounce. I like that a lot. Okay, and now the last part of the video. I know it's pretty long. I wanted to make like 20 minutes, but well, what can I do? I just want to show you everything that I did in this tutorial. But basically, let's talk about the sound design of the main synths. I think in 10 minutes I can walk you through everything. So what he had in the original track was this lead sound. And it's super, super simple. It's nothing extraordinary. And what I'm noticing in John Summers tracks, he doesn't use like very complex sound design at this point. So it's just, you can see the default saw waveform. I set it to mono, and then I applied a bit of effect. So let me bypass everything. This is how it sounds without the pretty long release time. A bit of unison here, just, I think, oh no, wait, I think I'm not even using it. But you can do that. You can do that. Again, like, I'm not trying to copy, I'm just trying to recreate and just make it vibe with my vibe, basically, how I see it, right? Then on the filter, we are using the same envelope to control it, a bit of drive to make it fatter. Compensate a bit on the master channel. That's going to be it. Then a bit of distortion. And then we can... 50% is nice. And then we can do like this. Put the envelope onto the drive. For more dynamics, like it's going to be... you can play with it. Then a bit of hyper dimension to make it feel whiter, and then a bit of reverb. Again, you can use like a separate reverb or in the synth. I don't like using reverb in the synth. That's pretty much it. So okay, and now let's talk about the main lead sound, which is like one of the keys in the original track. Check it out. It's pretty much like the same. Let's do in the drum. If you listen here, it's pretty much identical.
No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No.
Really similar. I might have to like fine tune the envelope, but the sound design I got pretty much right. It's almost identical. So the waveform is BSOD square, random. The envelope is like this, and then what he does, he modulates the release time. So he modulates the release time, he modulates the decay time, and you can see the amount. We can also modulate the filter. So I'm modulating the filter cutoff, the decay time, and the release time, right? So check it out. Right, you can see I'm modulating that. And it makes it longer. Again, so just see what works for your track and then just adapt that to your own track. In terms of like effects, you can see like I'm not even using like a lot of effects. Like stuff is simple. It doesn't have to be very complicated at this point. Just a bit of distortion. But the key here in this sound is how he goes with the reverb basically, right? So we are automating the decay time. You can see if I do like this. We are automating the decay time. First, it's pretty short. And then the second one, the dry wet is also about like 90%. Again, just see what works for your track and then use the same principles, use the same concept to achieve the same sound, right? And then the pre-delay is also very, very important at this point because pre-delay also creates that a bit of like spinning vibe. And then, oh wait, I'm also using... I didn't use the effect here, so we can skip that, we can delete. Because I used the reverb in Serum, but because this one is more flexible, like it has more settings, I decided to go with the stark reverb. And that's going to be it. So that's what I did for this one. Now, let's talk about one more sound. So I layered two sounds. One is like a bass shot. It's not identical, but it's, again, pretty close. Actually, dual is pretty nice. So I took a bass one shot. This is how it sounds on its own. And I put a guitar amp, that's stock Ableton plugin. And it has that crunchy, really nice sound to it. Like this. And then I made my own version of it. Which just adds a little bit. It's like a dubstep kind of sound. So we have two oscillators here. Pretty interesting sound design. So if I disable everything, it's gonna be pretty dry at this point. You see, it's just like this. So I took spectral waveforms, both of them, and then I applied a bit of sync, right? Pretty short envelope, it's all mono. The envelope 1 is controlling the cutoff. And the key here was distortion. Maybe a bit less. Yeah, something like this. EQ. I think we need to move the OTT. I would reduce the lows to something more like this to rebalance it. Something like this. And then the magic is in the filter. It's the MISC comb. it creates that screaming dubsteppy kind of sound. Maybe you want to mix it, but I would go like all in. Then we have a bit of reverb to give it a bit more metallic sound, just like this, and then the chorus. It's not really that obvious, but a tiny bit of chorus can be nice. So yeah, at this point, it's pretty much it for the whole track. You see, it's really nice and crunchy. So without the first layer, like, it's still pretty cool. But with this one, it just adds a little bit extra. Why not? Okay, cool. So that's it for the whole track. Let me play you everything once again, and then we'll talk a little bit about the master processing, because I have some processing on my master channel just to make it like sound a little bit better for this tutorial.
Look at me. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No regret. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush.
Okay, and now the final thing is going to be the master processing. So on the master processing, the first thing is going to be the saturation. Let me show you.
No hurry, no rush.
So what saturation does to the track
No hurry,
is I saturated 2 bands. Again, it makes it a little bit fatter at this point. So you can just see the settings here. I reduced the dynamics. Do something more like this. Let me do like this. It's more audible. (75% mix). The next step is a bit of EQ here. Again, I boosted 60 Hertz to give it like massive and powerful low end. A bit of 200 as well. But be careful when you're boosting that, because it can be a little bit too much. But for the sake of the video, it's fine. Like, if you listen to the low end, we still have good separation between the kick and the bass. That's the most important thing, right? So a bit of boosting here. We can boost a bit, maybe like 800. Let's see what the rest of the elements.
no hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No hurry,
Something like this. And then the rest I'm not really touching here, because
no hurry,
it's fine. This is without the EQ.
no hurry,
Pretty thin.
no rush. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no.
And then the last thing is a lot of compression. So just about 10%, 10-to-1 ratio. And the attack is something medium.
No hurry, no rush. No hurry,
I don't want to kill the dynamics. I just want to mix a little bit of like super compressed sound to my track to achieve that like pumping effect. And then you can play a little bit with the attack and release, let's say.
no hurry, no rush. No hurry,
I think medium attack.
no hurry,
Fine.
no rush.
And then the final step is going to be testing that in different environments. And then after that, we're going to end the video. So modern car.
No hurry, no rush.
Really nice, right?
No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no.
We might need to work a little bit with the low end, but let's say if we check this one,
No hurry, no rush.
it's very, very
No
similar.
hurry, no rush. No hurry.
But keep in mind that the original is mixed, it's mastered. Mine just has like pretty basic processing. So if I mix it a little bit more, it's gonna be like more interesting, right?
No hurry, no rush. No hurry, no rush.
But it's definitely sounding good.
No hurry.
Let's do spectrum, let's do cubes.
No hurry.
All good.
No rush.
low resolution.
No hurry, hurry. No rush, rush. No hurry, hurry. No rush, rush. No hurry, hurry. No rush.
Typical phones.
No hurry, hurry.
All good.
No rush, rush. No hurry, hurry. No rush, rush.
Wet.
No hurry, hurry. No rush, rush. No hurry, hurry.
And then the pleasure listening.
No hurry, hurry. No rush, rush. No hurry.
All good. So that's going to be pretty much it for this track. You can get the project, as I said, all the links down below. If you're interested in coaching, also let me know. I'm happy to work with you guys and yeah, help you with your music production skills. And that's going to be it for this tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I see you guys in the next one.